Welcome to the 2022 Trinity Prep Author Fest. My name is Alejandro, and I'm introducing James Ponti, who has written numerous middle school grade books, is the New York Times best-selling author of the City Spy series, and Carl Hiaasen, who is also a New York Times best-selling author of both adult and kids books, which include Hoot, Flush, Scat, Chomp, Skink, No Surrender, and Squirm. We hope you enjoy this featured conversation with these two amazing Florida authors.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I'm going to do an embarrassingly additional introduction. So the beauty of being a writer is I get to know a lot of writers, and of course, those writers are my favorite writers, and I get their books when they come out, my friends and stuff like that. But there are two writers who I don't know, who I'm not friends with, who are the only two writers whose books I get the day they come out, and I shut out everything to read. One is Michael Connelly, and the other is Carl Hiaasen. Both went to the University of Florida. Were you guys there at the same time by any chance? Did you?
I think we were. I think we were a couple years apart, but we were both working in South Florida. I think Michael was at the Sun Sentinel for a period of time when I was at the Herald as a reporter. But I think we didn't overlap in school.
Okay, but what I find interesting, both were journalists who went into mystery writing, but Carl made the amazing decision for us all to get into middle grade fiction, and he has written some amazing middle grade books. And since we're talking about writing for young people, I'd like to just start off, Carl, by asking you what were you reading as a young person? Were there quote unquote kids books that you read, or were you straight into John B. McDonald? I mean, was that?
No, I started. When I was a kid, that you didn't have this selection, especially the literary breadth that you have now in what we call YA and middle grade, kinds of books. There was just, in my case, it was, I read I was into sports, so they had all these sports biographies, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, those sorts of things. I read a lot of history, but it was written for kids. But when I really got going was with the Hardy Boys series. I remember, I think I was in, I want to say, third or fourth grade, when I went to the school library and I just saw the Hardy Boy book, Franklin W. Dixon. And I wasn't interested in Tom Swift and the sci-fi stuff so much, but this was brothers. Their dad was a private detective. The two brothers were sort of amateur detectives. And I started reading those, and I plowed through everyone that had been written up to that point fairly quickly because they were, the dialogue was good. The plot moved. I just thought, man, that's the first time I really got into trying to find everything that one author had done. And then, of course, later I found out that the author, Franklin W. Dixon, isn't his real name, and he's not what he's some guy in Canada who's being paid like almost nothing to do these books on the side of his regular career as a novelist, and these turn out to be the one thing to take off for him.
It's interesting you mentioned that their father was a private investigator, right? Father and son dynamics play a big role in the middle grade books that you write. We've got it ranges from a father away in Iraq to a father in jail for sinking a casino boat to a father who's disappeared, they're looking for. And I'm wondering, what was your what was your dad like? Are these based on kind of dynamics, emotional dynamics with your dad?
Oh, my dad was his line of the family was Norwegian, and my dad and my grandfather were both attorneys. And my dad was not a demonstrative guy, or not. I mean, he just worked, 6 days a week. He worked his butt off, and it was a great relationship. He died when he was pretty young, but all I remember is that he worked a lot, and I didn't use him as a model for any of the characters. And I think part of the reason in the novels is because I have a lot of friends, and just sort of writing stories as a journalist, you run into so many family situations. You run into so many sets where the father has played a huge role, either positively or negatively, in what's happened to a kid. And so I have kind of an array of different more colorful backgrounds for my characters' fathers than my own dad was. He was not a flashy guy. He was, he played, we're getting back to David Farrell. He was a golfer. I mean, he was just very low key. My grandfather was a very colorful guy, and he loved to litigate cases, and he loved to stand up in front of a courtroom. My dad would just got a headache thinking about talking to a jury. So he maybe in his heart he was Atticus Finch, but in real life he was just a probate lawyer. I'll just stay in the office and work. So I didn't have any. No, I guess I don't know where those characters came from. I guess it's just like anything else, your imagination.
Well, when you're writing, I think when you're writing for the age of readers that I write for all the time, that you write for sometimes, certainly that parental relationship is the key dynamic in their life, and understanding how you assert your independence in that. I find it interesting that, when I was a kid, I always identified with the kids in these, but when I write these, I'm a father, and it's just like I find actually the characters who I give the fewest flaws to tend to be the fathers, because I think I'm trying to relitigate my own parenting.
I think we all do that to some extent, Jim. I think when I started, I didn't have any intention of writing for young readers at all. An editor came to me and said, "Have you ever thought about writing for young people?" And I thought, I said, "Are you out of your mind? Haven't you read the books I've written for grown-ups? Why would you subject a young audience to this kind of warped sense of humor?" Kids have a great sense of humor. They have a great connection with the environmental themes that are important to me, and they love it when you make fun of grown-ups. And I thought, well, I've been in journalism all I've been doing is making fun of grown-ups my whole life. So, and at the time I started, my stepson at the time and my nephew and nieces at the time were all about, I want to say around 11, 12. And I didn't feel like they were ready to read the grown-up novels that I wrote yet, because, some language, some adult issues, whatever. And I thought, well, it'd be nice to have a book for them to read of mine that I wouldn't be nervous about giving them to read. And so I said, okay, I'll do one. I mean, it was really the book I wrote, Hoot, was supposed to be just like a one-off. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And then I was going to move back, go into the, in my other stuff. But the reaction to that book was so amazing. And I know you experienced this. What happens is you think you've got a certain handle on things, and you start getting letters from young readers, and they're the best mail that any author can get, especially someone with a background in journalism or where all of a sudden you're reading, they're so smart. They pick up everything in the novels, and they're frank. They're very blunt.
What I found, and I assume this is not just to me, is that yes, they're incredibly honest. They're much harder. I think adults will give you leeway on things that kids won't. Like I'll watch a mystery movie or I'll read a mystery book, and I'll think, oh, there's no way kids would let me get away with this leap. I'd get like 10 letters saying, well, why'd you do this? Or how about this? And the kids really, they don't just read the books. They love the books. I'll have kids write me, I've read City Spies now 10 times, and I've noted, and I'm like, I haven't read it 10 times. You're more expert in it than I am, and it's such a thing. So Hoot was met, and I'm assuming when you mentioned that list of people that for Carly, Ben, Samantha, Hannah, and of course Ryan, are those the nephews and nieces? Yeah.
Yeah, and that
you do this thing that I think actually, like you said, you never planned on it, but that you were kind of ideally suited to tap into a middle grade young adult audience. And then you went a Newbery honor, which had to be an unexpected career path a little bit earlier. It is famous. They're famous for the call that you get from the Newbery committee. Do you remember, was yours one of those early morning calls? Do you remember?
It was an early morning call. My editor, Nancy Cisco, was on the phone. She was with some other editors and people from the Newbery Committee. And I'll be honest with you, this is the God's honest truth. I didn't know it had even been submitted or nominated.
Right.
I had no idea.
Of course.
I was living down in the Keys, and I was working on another novel, and I knew the book had gotten some good reviews, and and all that. And then she just called me, and out of the blue, they're just giddy and they're laughing about this, and they're saying, "Congratulations!" And I thought, and I'm going, "This is a good thing then, right?" Because
Yeah.
I was,
You don't know, right?
you know,
Yeah.
but it was a complete shock. But I think because they knew my personality, that I'd worry about it and fret about it if I
Right.
knew, that I thought it would work better as a surprise if the book actually did one. So it did. It was a complete shock, and it blew me away, I have to say.
And so then I'm assuming the reception of the first book, which is such a good book, led you to think, okay, or certainly led your publisher to think, we need to do more of this. So you follow it up with Flush. And Flush is, I think Flush is probably my favorite of yours, which is, I don't like playing the favorite game because I love them all. But of the kids' books, I just love so much about Flush. And I'm wondering, was it always the intention that these are going to have the ecology theme? Was it just, that's how you think? Is that?
That's how I think. And that's how, when I was that age, Jim, that's what I thought. I mean, I was already, having grown up in South Florida, when I was very young, everything was getting paved. Places where
Right.
I'd spent a lot of my childhood outdoors, and every time you rode your bike around a corner, there'd be a new construction site in some place where you gone fishing or hiking or anything was gone. So I was already pretty angry, and I'd spent a fair amount of time in the Keys. And when I wrote Flush, I was living down in the Keys, and pollution was and is a real serious issue down there. So I like the idea of those kinds of villains because they happen to exist in real life. I also like the idea, and this was true in Hoot, of young people being able to make a difference, because we're living in a time right now where a lot of adults don't think they make a difference, and in those novels, the kids make a difference. They're going to fight for something that maybe their parents are too busy or aren't involved in, and I like those kinds of battles, and Flush. It was interesting. I mean, I think Hoot will always be my sentimental favorite. Structurally, as a novel, I thought Flush had a better construction in terms of, from a writer's point of view. I felt like I had the gears moving a little better for that one. I don't know how to explain it, but I just felt at the end of it that that I had done a better job on the structural parts of that book.
One thing about that you mentioned that I feel so strongly about is people ask, well, you write these mysteries or spy stories for kids, and what's the appeal of that? And to me, it's like, well, for one, I feel like kids are like detectives and spies, and that they're exploring the world and trying to figure it out. But that empowerment thing that you're talking about, which is, kids see all these, and I say kids, I think a third of the readers are probably adults that just like books that are in that shelf.
Right.
Are superheroes solving the world, but I like showing them, no, smart kids can do things. And I'm wondering, here you've had this dual life, triple life, with the adult books, the kids books, the columns, and the journalism. And when you're writing a column about, and your columns are obviously all great, not all, but the columns are great, but you're writing about true, actual, specific environmental things for adults, versus this where you're writing about based on truth, but fictional ones for kids. In a way, do you feel like the books for kids about the environment have a better chance to make a longer term impact, because what you're doing is you're getting kids thinking about that younger?
Well, my theory is, I think it's dangerous for writers to think or set out to make a difference. But what you want them to do is,
Totally agree.
in any kind of,
Yeah, I agree. And I didn't mean to overstate that, but yeah, okay.
I think they want you want them to buy into your characters and the motivation of your characters and the fact that your characters have a good heart and they're doing something. But what I found with the environmental stuff, that was the one thing with Hoot that you mentioned. When I wrote that, I thought this is just a Florida book. It was really a page out of my own childhood with these the little owls being destroyed. That all happened
right
where I lived. And so I was just going to write a book where the ending was a little better.
Yeah. There you
But
go.
I really thought of it as a Florida book, you know. But the letters I got were from everywhere, and it was, you know, republished in many, many languages. It was astonishing to me. People had never set foot in Florida or seen one of those little burrowing owls. And what I discovered was that kids connect with the fight. They connect also, they have just an amazing amount of clarity about what's right and what's wrong. And at some point on their way to adulthood, they're either going to retain that beautiful clarity, or it's going to get pounded out of them in college or somewhere along the line. But at those ages, those kids, you can take those kids on any field, put them on an airboat, take them in the Everglades, and they're all going to have the same reaction. The jaws are going to drop. They're going to go, wow, look at the alligator. Wow, look at the herons. And that's, I think, an important age to reach them, and not preach at them, but just get them connected to the idea that they can make a difference.
You know, I'm wondering too, you said that you felt like you had the cylinders firing on flush. I'm wondering if part of that is this kind of fear when people are writing for this audience of trying not to dumb it down, but trying to make it too complicated. But after you've done it the first time and you've gotten that reaction, you realize, wait a minute, these readers are capable of keeping up, you know.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and does that kind of free you? Is that a misconception people have about what books for this audience is, or is, you know, what do you feel about that?
Well, I know Nancy, my editor, when I was starting on Hooten, I'd never done anything for young readers. And, you know, the grown-up books I do have adult themes and adult language, and
Right.
it's sort of a brutal satire stuff. And I said, God, and then she said, well, they want the sense of humor. Kids have that same sense. They have the same kind of smart ass sense of humor. But she said the big mistake ever that writers make when they start writing for this audience is they write down to them. She says, don't write down to them. Don't ever write down. They're ahead of you. They're ahead of you on this. And you know, she was absolutely right. And now I'm working on another book for that audience now, and I'm not even really conscious in a way that I'm writing for you. I mean, obviously the language and some of the grown-up situations and things that you would find in a novel with adult characters,
Right, that
isn't going to be there. But the sensibility of it and the dialogue and the way things move and the way I always felt once I started doing this, and based on the letters I got, that the young readers were a lot sharper than the adult readers are.
Absolutely. You know, and I'm amazed. And, you know, I've written 9 books, and most of them are mystery based. I've never gotten a letter complaining about it being too complicated. I've never gotten pushback about, you know, it's like the thing that I probably was the most worried about at the beginning. That's not, you know, and then I look at Harry Potter and I can't keep up.
No.
And the kids are explaining Horcruxes and I'm like, okay, so they have it's like, I think maybe it's almost like how kids are better at learning foreign languages. You know, it's like their minds are a little more open to things. You know, I think that an element I really love in all of your books, specifically in the books for the young readers, is courage is a theme that you touch upon, whether it's standing up to authority, whether it's standing up to a bully at school, whether it's standing up to an abusive parent. What's your thought on courage? Am I reading something into it that's not?
No, I think you're right. You know, sometimes, you know, there's sometimes when I think people suppose that when you're writing, before you start, you sit down with, these are going to be the themes, or these are going to be the, and it doesn't work like that for me. I don't think it does for you, your stuff. I think
definitely not.
You're letting, in some way, you're being led and instructed and empowered by your characters, and sometimes they start to do things on the page that there's a moment coming that calls for bravery, or and they surprise you. But I don't think you set out. I think that I don't set out to say this is like you hit it right on the head. You know, they're not superheroes. They're just ordinary kids that run into something wrong that's happening. Something wrong is being done, and they don't know what to do to stop it, but they're going to figure it out, and they're going to do their best to figure it out. And those stories appeal to me a lot more personally than, you know, you just put a cape on somebody and fly them around for a couple chapters. You know, and even when I was a kid, you know, a lot of my friends were into comic books and, you know, Marvel Supers, and I read them and all that, but that's why I was drawn more back to something like the Hardy Boys, where these two kids are trying to solve a murder or a mystery at a house on the hill. It just, and the independence they had, and they didn't have any special powers. They just had their brains and their, you know, what they saw and what they observed. And those stories always appealed to me more than, you know, somebody getting in a rocket ship and going somewhere.
Like you said,
that was just my personal preference as a reader. So selfishly, I think most writers, if they're honest, will tell you the same thing, that the person you're really writing for, if you're writing, is yourself.
Right.
If you don't like what you're writing, if it isn't pleasing you and you aren't satisfied with it, it's not going to work for the readers either.
And if it's too calculated, I don't think it works. And if it's inauthentic, and I think that's maybe what people who don't work in this area realize is so important, is that kids see authenticity. Young readers see authenticity, and you know, I started in television. I worked at Nickelodeon. I worked at Disney Channel, and I remember this great thing when I worked at Nickelodeon, and we got this book called How to Nickelodeon. It was the rules of what it was. And rule number 1 was don't use the word fun. And there was this whole like page about, you know, fun is a word that adults use when they don't understand kids and they're trying to promise them something they can't deliver. Be fun. Don't say it will be fun. And it's always stuck with me. That and the other thing was they had the 2 pictures of this kid, same kid, and one was like a nice school portrait, and one was like a fisheye lens pressed up against his face, and he was smiling. And it said underneath the school portrait, they said, "This is Disney," and then under that it says, "This is us." And it's like, you know, I think kids see fakes. I think if you tell them it's going to be fun, they've heard that too many times from people who are talking down to them, and so embracing that is just so important. I'd love to talk about.
I was working on this book about called Scat, which is about Florida Panthers, which I've written about a lot when I was doing the column and as a reporter, and they're just the coolest animal. To think that in a place like South Florida with 7 million people, you still have wild panthers out in these areas of the Everglades. Right. But the one thing I wanted, that it wasn't fun. What I wanted to do is I wanted to give these kids the experience of walking through the woods and looking up and seeing this incredible thing looking back at you. And there's never been an attack by a panther on a human being ever in history. They don't even want to see you. They don't want to be around you. But the idea is you lay eyes on one and you're part of a very sort of special elite group, because I know generations of Floridians, not one of them ever seen a panther. So I thought if I could bring the kid into that experience, but it wasn't calculated, but it was just cool. You know, it's cool.
Well, it's what you said, which is writing to yourself, writing for yourself, and then that connects to other people because they see that, okay, you believe it. Because I read somewhere you actually saw one once, right? You were in that small group.
I was in a car and I passed one on the side of the road, and it was in a rainstorm. It was like an apparition. You know, you're driving and what is that big animal? And then it leaped from the road into the woods and stretched out, you know, to its length. And I just said that I saw one. And then I went with some panther biologists they start them and then they give them medicine, and they were given a sequence. So they track them and they do that, and they put them to sleep for about 10 minutes and give them medicine and things. It's a panther that had something wrong with him. And then we all ran back and waiting for him to get up and take off. It was pretty cool, but you know, it's hard for me. First of all, newspapers are written for a little different audiences than that. So, but those are the kinds of Florida experiences, because this is the only place I've ever lived, and the only scenes that I know are here. So that's what I have to work with, you know, and that's what I mean. I think it's an important thing for writers. to stick with what you know.
Right, absolutely. I want to get into a writing technique thing for a moment, if I can. I have a writing exercise that I use that actually you are often a part of, which is when I'm trying to free my brain, I will pick between 5 and 10 books off my shelf, and I'll read the first paragraph or the first page. And I want different types, and I don't want those words. I just want to see like exciting beginnings and, oh, that's right, that's how you start a chapter or a book. I love in your adult books there is this kind of, I don't know if signature is the right word for it, but your opening paragraphs have this feel. So I'm going to read one here. This is one I love. This is from tourist season. Of your adult books, this is something I can read with the kid audience. Yeah.
Okay.
On the morning of December 1st, a man named Theodore Bellamy went swimming the Atlantic Ocean off South Florida. Bellamy was a poor swimmer, but he was a good real estate man and a loyal Shriner. All right, so I am hooked at that point. And now I look at Chomp, which is a shorter version, but it's a different signature than the adult books have. But, Mickey Cray had been out of work ever since a dead iguana fell from a palm tree and hit him in the head. Oh, I am in envy of that in the same way that I am in envy of the Coen brothers. There are certain things that you read and you realize I would never have done that. How important is that first sentence, first paragraph, first page of a book? How much time do you spend on it?
I think it's crucial, and I spend way too much time on it, but I think it's crucial. And I think part of that comes from a life in the newspaper business where what we call the lead, and you have to grab them. Here's your story, and it might be 600 words. You have to grab them in the first paragraph, and then you want them, if it jumps to the next page, you want to have them keep reading. So I was always trained. There's a sense of pace, even if you're writing about the local sewer board. You get them, try to hook them early and keep going with the facts. And I think with fiction, it's extreme. I think because there's so much out there to choose from, it's extremely important. You also want there to be a little bit of a reflection of the tone, the narrative tone that
Right.
This is what you're going to be dealing with. You're going to be dealing with an iguana, the iguana. That really happens, by the way. The iguanas freeze and they do fall out of the trees. But
it's that time of year now, I think, right? Isn't this?
Yeah, we're getting close. And all the TV stations put iguana alerts up now in Florida. It's going to be a freezing night, so don't be surprised if iguana falls out of the tree and hits your Toyota, over the night. I mean, but the stuff is inherently funny. But if you can present it in that way, I think the first page is critical. And I do what you do. I don't do it when I'm writing so much because I'm always afraid of being subconsciously influenced by the style of the writer. But when I get books in the mail, as I'm sure you do, people want, a blurb. They want you to read it and say something nice about the book. Here's what I do. I don't read the first page because I know that page has gotten more work and more attention from the editor and the writer.
Very interesting.
I turn to the middle of the book. That's the big tough slog in the middle of any novel. You got to keep the momentum going. You're not sure how it's going. I read one of those pages and I know right away, okay, yeah, I don't want to, nice try, but I can't read the whole book. But if it's still as good as what the first page probably was, then I'll think, okay, this is something I'll tackle.
I totally get what you say about not wanting to mimic a style. That's part of the reason I do so many, because I want very different.
Yeah.
I just want to kind of stretch my brain, but it is such an important thing to me, the beginnings, and because my background is in television,
Right.
and you write to cliffhangers at commercials because you don't want people to change.
That's
By
right.
chapter endings, just kind of without intention, I tend to write cliffhanger chapter endings just because that's what I had been drilled into doing for my day job for so long. How do you do that as well?
I wouldn't call. I'm very conscious about where to end the chapters, but I wouldn't call them cliffhangers in the sense that they don't necessarily end with a mystery or something. And with a decisive event that, okay, I want to see what the character's going to do next, and it might be a surprise, or it might just be a wait a minute. You just want them to turn the page. That's our job.
For me, that's the goal, not a cliffhanger in the sense of the mystery, but it's like I want to end it on. I always imagine it is 1:30 in the morning and a kid is supposed to have gone to sleep
Exactly.
and has just told themselves, I'm just going to finish this chapter, and I want to make it hard on them not to say, well, I got to know what happens next.
See, that's perfect. That's
So often for me, it's not even like a dun dun dun, but it's more like a reveal of oh, wait a second, is that where we're heading next? Well, that sounds like fun. So
exactly.
it can
be just a little plot turn, and then they're going, wait a minute. But I just think that's good writing. And I say this when I give talks and things, and I say, this is all well and good that we talk about this literary stuff, and the basic line is our job is to be entertainers.
Yes.
There's thousands of books published, and your job as a storyteller, and this is if you're writing nonfiction as well, your job as a storyteller is to write in a way that they can hardly catch their breath, and they want to keep reading, and they want to keep you have to get them invested in your characters. You have them buying into the plots and the subplots. All that has to work, because the worst thing is you don't want to lose somebody after 50 pages or 100 pages. And we've all done this, read a book with gets going, it's so great, and you get in the middle of it and go, oh, are you kidding me? That's the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I
so disappointing. And I spent in the last 15 years of my life, much of it doing documentaries for NBC Sports, and I used to do documentaries for the History Channel. And the first thing I learned there that was, this is as close to journalism as I've been, is just because it's true doesn't mean it can be less interesting. Like the rules of fiction, the rules of storytelling still apply. You just can't make stuff up. You've got to find the truth in it. And what I love about writing mysteries and the kinds of books that both of us get to write is they're the most interactive books. I feel like, there are certain books that we get and we read and you enjoy them and you observe them. But kind of the conceit at the very beginning of a mystery is you're going to play along. I, as the author, am going to give you clues along with the characters. And the fun for you is, can you figure it out first? And the fun for me is, can I write a story where you don't figure it out? And then when you hear the solution, you go, of course, that was, how did I miss that? Do you have a similar thought process in there?
Yeah, I do. I don't know. I've always felt that I wasn't disciplined enough in terms of the plotting, because I really do sort of have a premise and I just turn the characters loose. And sometimes they surprise you in a big way, and sometimes they disappoint you. But I don't have an outline or anything. I just have an idea. So about 3/4 of the way through the manuscript, a certain panic sets in, but it's kind of a healthy panic, because you got to bring everything together. And I feel that it's kind of a high wire act, and there's a lot of anxiety, but in the end, it kind of pays off. Right now, the book I'm working on is set in Key West, and there's a very real event that had happened did happen years early in Key West, and it plays a role in this book. And it's unusual for me because it's a historical event, not a funny one, right. But I have to work it into the lives of these young people in the book right now, and how would it affect them. And like you said, the trick is to keep it in the flow and in the voice that you want it to be, without sounding, without lapsing into a sort of pedantic history voice.
Right.
I don't do Ken Burns very well. So
no.
And that's not what people expect when they get the book.
In a very odd twist, I once wrote a character. Ken Burns is a character on an animated series called Clifford's Puppy Days. They had like celebrity. So Clifford met Ken Burns. It was I got to write either Jason Kidd or Ken Burns, and I picked Ken Burns, and then my so, which is an odd segue. But years of writing kids television, you run into different things. I'm wondering if that. Do you have someone? You obviously have been writing for long enough that you have confidence in your ability. Whether you have these moments of, and I mean, you can write a book, I guess. Whether you think you're greater, do you have someone that reads along the way, or do you finish completely and then hand the complete manuscript to a trusted set of eyes?
What I do is I do about 5 chapters, and then I send the first 5 I send to my agent, who I've had. My agent's been my agent since 1979, and my editor, whether it's the editor for the young readers or for the adult book, and I get some feedback from them. But I don't let it, and then I might write another 5 or 6 chapters and do the same thing. But those are the only 2 people that because I found, or I've had experience with knowing writers who showed their stuff to a lot of people, and they had input in it, and it literally they got stalled because there was somebody was saying this, somebody was saying that. So I don't know whether it's just fear of being. It's not fear of being criticized. It's just I have to have enough trust in what I'm trying to do, not to get derailed by someone else. And my editor, these editors, and my agent have known me. I mean, they're pretty honest with me, and they'll just say, you know, I'm not sure about this character, but we'll talk in another 5 or 10 chapters, see how he's doing and see how she's doing. And I've had a couple instances where and especially this was an adult book, and my Sonny Mehta, who was a fabulous editor at Keynote, he said, okay, I was about halfway through. He goes, I don't know if this character belongs in this book, so write more for me, and then I'll look at the whole manuscript. So I took this one character that I kind of liked, and I put more scenes in, did this, and at the end of it, and he goes, you know, I love the book, but she doesn't belong in this book, or wow. He doesn't. Now you have a big manuscript, and he said, I think, and now you have to go back, and you know, because I trusted Sonny, I went back and I removed all traces, and this means plot points that they're involved in or scenes that the characters, and it was like, I told people, it was like taking a palm frond and going back over the desert to try to erase footprints after you've walked across it, and I was aggravated at the time because it was a lot of work, but in the end, it made the book better. He was absolutely right. It was a good character, just wrong book.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of good characters, I know we have just time for maybe one more question. You've done so for middle grade writers, you've done Hoot, Flush, Scat, Chomp, and Squirm, but you ventured into young adult with, you know, the character who you'll probably be identified with forever makes an appearance. Clinton Tyree, better known as Skink. Tell me about writing young adult, and tell me about, was it the hope to be able to introduce Skink into a different world, or how did that book come to be?
I just thought I had a lot of readers who had read my stuff when they were younger, and we're now starting to read the grown-up books, and they love the character Skink. And I thought, well, you know, the world has changed a bit, and he's this fictional ex-governor of Florida. He wasn't governor very long. He couldn't stand the corruption, and he really went off the deep end and just went off into the woods, and he lives on roadkill out in the woods, you know. But I thought it was an okay time to let a younger audience meet him. Yeah. You know, I mean, in the beginning, I would have said, no, that's just not suitable. But and the storyline for that book, for Skink, for the kids, I thought was a good one. And he is a warrior. He's getting kind of old. I thought it was okay. Finally, they could meet him. But in the early years, in the early adult books, it was too much. But I thought it worked out, and it wasn't supposed to be anything more than that one book. I just thought at some point those readers were aging out anyway, right. You know, and they're going to meet him eventually. So why not now?
Well, I would just like to say that as a kid grew up in Florida, I love our home state, and I am so happy that you have written about it in a way that is honest and humorous and fun and adventurous, and introduced people to it. And you know, this is the state that's, for as far as young adult writing, not going back to Marjorie Kinnan Rolland days, but has given us John Green and Kate DiCamillo and Ransom Riggs and Soma Chinani, and Florida has, you complete that group that has just contributed so much to young adult literature. And thank you so much for spending the time with us today. And thank you so much for your books. And again, there'll be a Tuesday coming up soon when a new Carl Hiaasen book comes out, and I will be there.
Oh, thanks.
In line getting it, and I can't wait.
Thanks for the kind words so much, and thanks to everybody for for including me in the program here.